I arrived at the hotel feeling like I had walked into someone else's play. The chandeliers were bright. The tables were spaced like small islands. Men in dark suits and women in polished dresses moved through the room with practiced smiles. My husband stood near the head table and people clustered around him as if he were gravity. I had dressed for the evening. I had practiced polite small talk. I had not prepared for the way I would be erased. The first moments were small. A gaze that did not meet mine. A question that skipped me and went to someone else. A compliment aimed at people I had helped prepare. The laughter moved around me. I felt as if I had become background for a scene in which I had once been a player. I told myself that I was sensitive. I told myself that these rooms were built from habits. I tried to be patient. Then the comment came that made the air change. A man I had met once asked my husband whether I worked. He said it with a tone that expected a simple answer. My husband answered as if we were an annotation in his life. He said everything he needed to say to keep the focus on himself. He did not say my name. He did not say what I had done in the career that had supported the life we had built. The silence that followed was a kind of verdict. I felt small and then I felt very clear. It is strange how clarity can arrive through pain. I thought about all the late nights when I had sat with spreadsheets and presentations. I thought about the times I had rewritten a speech at 3 in the morning. I thought about the contracts I had read and the vendors I had courted. I thought about how many meetings had gone differently because I had set the tone before my husband arrived. The next few days were quiet at home. My husband seemed comfortable with the story everyone told. He called it an oversight. He said the room had its own rhythm. He told me that my feelings were valid but that I should not make the moment larger than it was. He asked me to let it go. His words were clean. They did not match the small gestures that had become a pattern. I could not accept being a footnote in the story of our life. I do not want destruction. I wanted truth. I wanted the ledger to be right. I wanted the people in that room to see the names behind the work that paid their salaries. I wanted the children of women who were erased to have a different example. My plan was not revenge in the sense of humiliation. My plan was a methodical correction. I would show work done. I would show signatures and emails and witnesses. I would not yell. I would show. For weeks I gathered documents. I traced project timelines. I opened old emails and found suggestions that had later been presented publicly without attribution. I pulled contracts and invoices that had my notes in the margins. I saved timestamps and meeting records. I built a file that read like a narrative of contribution. I worked quietly because drama would allow them to dismiss me as emotional. Evidence removes the easy dismissal. I reached out to people who had worked with me in the margins. Some had been colleagues in consulting projects. Some had been suppliers I had met in small kitchens and hotel lobbies. None owed me anything. Some had moved on to other companies. Some had forgotten details. I asked for clarity. I asked for short statements that described who had led which parts of the work. I phrased each request with neutral language. I was asking for factual corrections. A few replies surprised me. One man wrote that he had always assumed I was the project lead. Another sent a photo from a meeting with my notes visible in the folder. A former client emailed to say that the negotiation that saved the deal had been mine. People started to remember. For some it was a small kindness. For others it seemed like a correction that needed to be made. I also spoke with a lawyer. I wanted to know what could be done that would make a factual difference without breaking the company. The lawyer explained the difference between legal ownership and public credit. He explained that accuracy mattered to the firm reputation. He encouraged me to preserve the documents and to think about how to present them. He warned against anything that looked like a vendetta. He advised focus. The first public move required a sensitive approach. I arranged a meeting with a journalist who had written long pieces about corporate culture. I did not want gossip. I wanted an investigation that would look at documents and verify claims. I prepared for that meeting. I rehearsed the timeline. I organized the emails and the contracts into a package that told a clear story of who had done the work and when. When I sat across from the journalist, I felt an old sensation of being underestimated. He had heard the name of my husband many times. He had not met me. I spoke in a steady voice. I described the projects and the names involved. I showed the emails in which I had proposed strategies. I showed the signed contracts with dates that matched my notes. The journalist asked precise questions. He wanted to know who had negotiated which clause. He wanted witnesses. I gave him everything I could. The resulting article was not a headline meant to wound. It was a careful piece that placed credit where credit belonged. It quoted emails and specific timelines. It showed that key operational decisions had been influenced by work I had done. It did not call my husband dishonest. It called out the way narratives can form when one person is given the spotlight. The reaction was immediate. At the company there was a flurry of calls. Clients asked for clarifications. The board asked for an internal review of credit and contribution. My husband read the article as if he had consumed a new language. He called me and said he was surprised. He said he had not known the extent of the attributions. He said the piece was unfair. His voice had the shape of a man trying to protect himself from a new reality. I felt vindicated. I felt hollow. The truth had found an audience. The world could no longer call me a nobody with the ease it had used before. Yet the truths in public are hard to carry across a kitchen table. Our marriage had to absorb the fact that history was being rewritten. My choice had been to insist on accuracy. His fear was that accuracy would diminish him in the eyes of those who had propped him up. Public correction did not change everything. Some of his friends called to say that they had always known he relied heavily on others. Some apologized. Others joked about the awkwardness of the new arrangement. A few withdrew. They said that the evenings had been easier when the story was simple. The company changed gradually. Contracts were amended to show who had led which deals. Press releases became more precise in naming teams. Small public edits shifted the pattern. I started to build my own platform. I accepted invitations to speak about leadership and team building. I took care in selecting stages and panels. I spoke about negotiation. I spoke about the daily work of keeping teams together. My tone was calm. I made sure that my message was clear and useful. I did not want to be the woman who only pointed to an injustice. I wanted to be the person who showed how to do the work. There were private negotiations too. I asked for formal recognition at the company when financial contribution had been partly mine. I requested that my role be documented in future reports. I negotiated for compensation where my input had been essential. These talks were difficult. They required patience and clarity. They required me to resist the urge to punish. I also had to make decisions about the marriage. The easiest thing would have been to demand a public apology and walk away. The most courageous thing was to ask for sustained change. I asked my husband to name me at events. I asked him to cite my role in public talks. I asked for structural changes that would make it harder for contributions to be erased in the future. He resisted at first. He feared appearing weak. He feared losing the narrative he had been told to inhabit. Change happened slowly. He began to introduce me by my full name in one event. He began to mention a specific project I had led in an interview. He started asking my advice in public meetings. These moves were not symbolic alone. They shaped how others saw the world. When a leader names the hand that helps them, the pattern migrates. There were tests. Old habits surfaced in small ways. At a press event he used language that omitted my name. I stood up and corrected him in a firm but composed way. I did not shout or humiliate. I spoke the facts that people in the room needed to hear. The audience shifted. Some nodded. Others looked surprised. My husband blushed. He adjusted his notes and continued. The most important change was inside me. I learned to refuse invisibility. I stopped letting the absence of praise define my worth. I started documenting my work in ways that were visible and portable. I kept records. I asked for acknowledgement. I practiced naming my contribution calmly. This way of being was neither vengeful nor silent. It was insistence accompanied by evidence. Friends asked me if I felt cruel. I said no. I said that reclaiming credit is a way of fixing a ledger. It is a way of making sure the economy of attention and reward is fairer. I said that some people will change and some will not. I said that you must make decisions based on what you want to preserve. The company adapted. It did not collapse. It became more accurate. Teams were listed in reports. Photographs included those who had earned their place. Contracts were clearer about who had negotiated each clause. These are small structural changes. They do not feel dramatic. Yet they alter how credit flows. 1 year after the dinner I returned to a similar room. The chandeliers were the same. The tables were set in the same way. The difference was visible in the faces that turned toward me. People I had only ever seen as background now asked me about a project I had led. My husband introduced me as a partner in the truest sense. He used my name in front of his peers. The tone of the room had changed. The ending is not theatrical. There was no public falling from grace. There was not a spectacle. There was the slow correction of a narrative that had been allowed to omit work that mattered. That correction was not easy. It required time and records and conversations that were not always pleasant. It required me to be patient and decisive. If you feel unseen, start by gathering the facts. Keep records of emails and contracts. Ask witnesses for short statements. Present your case with calm clarity. Do not begin with accusation. Begin with evidence. Build a platform so that your voice has a stage. Insist on being named. Seek institutional changes that make erasure harder. No one can take away your name unless you allow it to happen. Being visible is a practice. It requires files and witness and a refusal to accept the comfort of small gestures that leave the bottom line intact. Revenge that repairs is stronger than revenge that destroys. It does not humiliate. It corrects. I did not set out to punish my husband. I set out to make sure that the ledger matched the work. He learned to notice. He learned to speak my name in rooms where it mattered. He learned to change habits that once made invisibility easy. I learned to speak for myself in a way that was precise. We built a life that was truer because we faced the facts. This is the story of how I stopped being called a nobody. It is a story of records and quiet conversations and small public acts. It is a story of insisting on truth. It is also a story of repair. The room that once ignored me learned to see me. The people who had laughed learned to listen. The signature on the paycheck was no longer a secret. It was a name written plainly.